Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razan Pereira. Some of the opposition-ruled states have declared that they will not implement the changes in the Citizenship Act. Kerala, Punjab, West Bengal and Chhattisgarh have claimed that they will block implementation of the CAA in their states. Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister has also indicated that his government is against the law. Meanwhile, the Maharashtra government will take a decision on the implementation of the Citizenship Amendment Act only after the Supreme Court hears a bunch of petitions challenging the legislation. On the other hand, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said that the threat by some states not to implement the Citizenship Amendment Act is a challenge to India's federal structure, as the legislation has been passed by the Parliament and is binding on all states after the presidential assent. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze rights of the centre and the states in our federal structure. Joining me on the program today are Satya Prakash, legal editor, The Tribune; J. Sai Deepak, advocate of the Supreme Court; Dr. L. Hanumantaiah, member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha; and also we'll be joined by Mr. S. C. Tripathi, former Principal Secretary, Uttar Pradesh, later on in the program. All right, let me now begin the program. J. Sai Deepak, let me begin with you. Let's first get a legal perspective and understand why is the legislation passed by Parliament binding on all states?
So, as far as the federal structure is concerned, what is the primary definition of it, at least as far as the Indian context is concerned, we must be very clear about it. There are any number of discussions and debates on whether it is quasi-federal, federal or largely unitary and partly federal. Okay, but for all practical purposes, you have to take a look at Chapter 11, Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Chapter 5 deals with the Union, Chapter 6 deals with the states and Chapter 11 deals with relations between the Union and the states. Now, if you put all of these together, the one thing that the Constitution tries to do is to divide the territory between the states and the Union, and some portions where there is an overlap, which leads to this concept of the three lists: the Union list, the concurrent list as well as the state list. Now, be that as it may, while it could be argued that with respect to those subjects which fall within the state list, the state is supreme, the fact remains that the Union retains several supervisory powers even with respect to those aspects, and it could have overarching powers in certain specific circumstances. For instance, the one specific, let's say bottom line in terms of what is it that ultimately decides the relationship, who is supreme, can be decided on one aspect. It is possible for the Union to seek President's rule when the states choose to violate the Constitution, and that effectively decides the hierarchy between the Union and the states. So, unlike the 1935 Act, the Government of India Act of 1935, which said that India is a federation of states, here it says it is a union of states. And if you look at Articles 3 to 11, at least with respect to both the formation of states or the division of states and then the concept of citizenship under Part 2, it is the Union Parliament or the Union Legislature which effectively rules the roost on the question or let's say on the issue in question with respect to citizenship. Therefore, anyone who chooses to violate the central legislation with respect to citizenship will effectively invite and perhaps trigger certain mechanisms that call for violation or which result in imposition of the President's rule for violation of the Constitution, because this goes to the heart of something very, very important, which is citizenship. This is not just any other law and order issue, it goes beyond that. It's a question of integrity, it's a question of sovereignty. And therefore, if the Union is not able to impose its will over the state, even with respect to something so fundamental such as citizenship, it would effectively be calling into question the might of the Union itself. And therefore, it could in some ways be seen as compromising on national integrity and therefore even violation of the Constitution. That is something that is fairly an arguable position to take, according to me.
Okay, all right. Dr. Hanumantaiah, let me bring you to the picture now then. So, why then are the opposition ruled states threatening not to implement this act?
Sir, though India, the act passed by the Parliament, it abide by all the states. The pre-consultation was not done by the Government of India. It has not taken such an important legislation, has not taken the consensus of the country, and many states have the differences, which has been expressed in the Parliament, both in the lower house and the upper house. Now, the last resort of the states to reject the legislation is they are telling that we are not going to implement. See, as per law, I don't differ with the other gentleman that it is bound by all the states. But when the states are not able to implement the law which is bound by all, what is the alternative? So they are telling to safeguard the states and safeguard the people of the state that who are protesting against the law, that we are not in a position to implement the law. That is what they are telling.
Okay, all right. So, Satya Prakash, let me bring you into the picture now and try and understand what are the rights of the states in our federal structure.
Well, states, there are three parts. One is legislative, the other is administrative, third is financial. So for us, this would be this will essentially fall in the legislative part and to some extent administrative. Legislative because as a subject, citizenship and naturalization falls in union list. I think entry 17 is the entry. So essentially, it is a subject on which only union, that is parliament, can make laws, and it has made it. For states to say that they will not implement it, that is not permissible. As Sai has already pointed out, it can be interpreted as breakdown of constitutional machinery, inviting the wrath of the centre, and maybe the centre would be constitutionally right in invoking 356. That said, I don't think centre is going to invoke 356 for this. What the states are doing, it's basically it's politicking. And second is, the only elbow room available to states is that they can delay the implementation of this particular enactment on the ground that law and order situation on the ground is not permitting implementation of the law. That's it. They cannot say that they will not implement it. That will simply violate the constitutional framework, and in which the states don't have much of say so far as laws enacted by parliament is concerned. They have to implement it. They cannot refuse it.
Okay, all right. Sai Deepak, you know, as far as the constitution is concerned, what exactly does it say about citizenship and naturalization? And also, does it have any directions for the states on this particular subject matter?
So I think a good amount of confusion on this particular issue is largely attributable to the thorough muddling of the waters between NRC and CAB. Okay. First of all, both these exercises fall within exclusively the domain of the union, with the state playing the role of implementation, because this is a question of citizenship under entry 17. As Mr. Satya Prakash has rightly pointed out, this forms part of entry 17 of the union list. Therefore, constitutionally speaking, there is no question, or there is no two ways about the fact that the parliament rules the roost on this particular topic. Okay, be it NRC or CAA, not CAB anymore. Now, coming to the question of implementation of CAA by states, what is the implementation that is being sought for? Who is going to give the citizenship? It's not the states. It is only the centre. It is only the union. Therefore, when they say that they are not in a position to implement, I am not sure of what is it exactly that this posturing is about in terms of operational specificities. What is it that the states are expected to do in terms of this? There are only certain portions where employment with the government, let's say for a period of 11 years previously, has now been reduced to 5 years for these for these persecuted minorities from these three states, from the third schedule of the Citizenship Act. Even that is something that is for the centre to take cognizance of in granting citizenship to these persecuted minorities and people belong to that group. But the state really has not too much of a role as far as the implementation is concerned, except for identifying those people who live within their territories for the purposes of nationalization and citizenship and vestation of citizenship by the union. So if they are saying that we are not in a position to identify the persecuted minorities from these three countries, it is not something which is an administrative denial. It is effectively saying we won't do it even if we have the wherewithal to do it. Now, coming to the question of the regulatory framework. Part 2 of the Constitution deals with the question of citizenship, Articles 5 to 11. The specific provision which effectively gives the Parliament the power to pass a law with respect to citizenship is Article 11, which effectively says that nothing in these provisions from 5 to 11 shall take away the power of the Parliament and shall not derogate from the power of the Parliament to pass any law with respect to citizenship. So that's where this entire thing comes from. So from there you go to citizenship, and this is post 1950, therefore this is the Citizenship Act of 1955. The Foreigners Act is a colonial legislation that has continued to exist, and we continue to use it, which is of 1946, that continues to exist. What is the division? Vestation of citizenship falls within the domain of Articles 5 to 11 plus the Citizenship Act, whereas deportation of illegal migrants falls within the scope of the Foreigners Act. That's a different issue altogether. Okay. Therefore, NRC falls primarily within the domain of the Foreigners Act, coupled with the Citizenship Act, because those who are illegal migrants can be deported through to a foreigners tribunal which is set up under the Foreigners Act, whereas the NRC is under the citizenship rules which have been separately constituted under the framework, so to speak. So, as far as the entire, let's say, interplay between these three acts are concerned, citizenship falls under one specific legislation coupled with the provisions of the Constitution, whereas the aspect of deportation of illegal migrants falls under a different legislation. Therefore, there is no confusion at all. In none of these activities does it call for any prerogative or discretion of the states. Assam was only an implementing authority pursuant to orders of the court, but ultimately this was taken up by the union. This was an activity of the union primarily because the aspect of citizenship exclusively falls within the scope of the union. There is no question about that at all. So, I don't think this is a case of a situation where the states are saying we don't have the resources or the wherewithal to implement this particular mechanism. It is a patent, blatant, brazen refusal to implement the law of the land. Pending any stay which is granted by the Supreme Court over the legislation or the amendment, or pending a final decision, states have no option but to implement it. That is the law of the land. They have to stick to the Constitution. Should they not do so, whether the government does it or not, I certainly believe that it sets a terrible example when states refuse to follow the law.
Okay, all right. So, Dr. Hanumantayya, so of late, have we seen, a further divide as far as the center and the states are concerned? I say this because, the center and states have been at loggerheads on several issues. The most recent one, of course, being the GST compensation. We saw that many states do not want to implement Ayushman Bharat as well. So, is this a tactic really as far as the opposition ruled states are concerned to ensure that they block some of the legislations or some of the schemes of the center?
Sir, the same Prime Minister who is with us today has said the GST will not be implemented by Gujarat government when he was the Chief Minister. Likewise, there are so many state Chief Ministers who have said that we are not going to implement. That is one part. But today, it is CAB or NRC. The states are bound to implement, but they have to see the law and order problem also. They have to respect the mood of the people also, their expression also. That is the problem why they are telling that we are not in a position to implement the ACB. See, if they don't want to implement, the states may not be interested to not to implement it. But the situation demands them that they are not in a position to implement it. And there is one more thing in this. The state and center relation should be cordial, should be as per the Constitution, should take the opinion of the states before implementing such an act, which the government of India has not done it. So now, if you don't consult them, if you don't take the opinion of those chief ministers where the opposition party governments are ruling, sir, in this case, the interesting part is the ruling party governments are in a crux. They are not able to implement the act. That is the main problem here. So what is the government of India now telling when the ruling party chief ministers are in problem, that they are showing their inability to implement the act is the main problem in this case. And one more thing which I wanted to make here is, see, the center and state relation, there were a lot of committees which has given the reports. Those committees have already said there should be a cordial relation. Nothing should be implemented forcibly by the government of India because this is the union of states.
Satyaprakash, so whenever there is a tussle, a conflict between the center and the states, of course, it is the judiciary then that is called in and asked to try and sort out the problem. But is the judiciary also bound in a case such as this, when you look at citizenship and so on and so forth, by the Constitution?
Well, everybody is bound by the Constitution. We are not like the UK where parliamentary supremacy reigns. Here, Constitution is supreme, neither Supreme Court nor Parliament nor the Executive. Nobody is supreme except the Constitution. Here, the real problem is not about what the state governments are saying, ruled by the opposition parties, or in some cases ruled by BJP. The real problem is the misinformation about NRC and about Citizenship Amendment Act. The very simple thing is that Citizenship Amendment Act does not relate to any Indian at all. It relates to certain migrants from Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. The Parliament has chosen to create a specific category. Classification is that those who are persecuted, for them, there is a relaxation. Instead of waiting for 11 years, they can be given citizenship in 5 years, and the cut-off date is 31st of December 2014. This thing is not being told to the people, and that is why there is lots of misgiving and people are coming on the streets. Even students, there are several footages available where you ask a student who is protesting, why are you protesting? They are not aware about they are simply saying that we are protesting against this particular bill. So there is a need for the government and also for responsible people to tell people that this does not relate to the citizens already who are Indians. It only relates to foreigners who are illegally here or maybe legally, but they don't have document, they have overstayed. It relates to them. Second is the question regarding federalism Mr. Hanumanthaiah talked about. India is a federal state, but its nature is completely different. And in all important issues, the center has been given power, and whether it's a true federal state or not, it's determined by the two important factors. One is who does have the residuary powers. Here the residuary powers, unlike in the US, rest with the Union. Second, who has the power to amend the constitution. Unlike the US where the ultimate power to amend the constitution rests with the states, here the power is solely with parliament. Only in some cases the states, the bill passed by parliament by 2/3 majority, it goes to states for half the states have to ratify it. Otherwise, so far as initiation of amendment is concerned, no state has any say whatsoever except Article 169, which is where you need a recommendation from the state assembly for creating or abolishing the upper house of a state. Otherwise, India is a thoroughly a state which has given all the most important powers to the Union, and states, we have created this federal structure not because we wanted a federation. We have created it because India is a vast land, and post Second World War, when most of the colonial powers, they went back to their country and left these territories, it was difficult to hold them together because it was not the brute force which they used that the elected governments could use. So that is why this is to accommodate regional aspirations and also for practical purposes of administration that we opted for federal structure. And that is why this dual polity, nothing else. The problem is that in intellectual discourses, there are lots of people who try to fantasize about India being federation, India being federal structure. The structure is federal, but the spirit remains unitary, and that is the very first article of the Constitution. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states, not a federation of states.
Okay, all right. We are now joined by Mr. S.C. Tripathi, former Principal Secretary, Uttar Pradesh, joining us on the phone line right now. Mr. Tripathi, let me bring you into the discussion now, and let's try and analyze and find out now the threat by some of the states not to implement the CAA. Is that a threat to the federal structure?
Such cases have arisen in the past also. But I think all those states also know that they have to follow the law, and the citizenship is, as has been explained, is in the union list where Parliament alone can pass laws, and under Article 256 and 257, the states are obliged to help the central government in execution of the laws passed by the Parliament, and therefore, if the states do not comply with that, the central government can give direction, can help them and give them administrative support, financial support. But if they continue to persist and do not go to Supreme Court, there is an option available to them. They can go to Supreme Court and say that this law is unconstitutional. But failing this, I think they have no option. They can get some time, they can get some support from the Union government, but ultimately they have to comply.
Okay, all right, all right. Taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Tripathi, do stay with us. I'll come back to you for another comment on the program. So, a lot has been said about law and order and the situation in some of the opposition ruled states. Now let's not forget, J. Sai Deepak, that law and order is a state subject. Correct. So can the states now hide behind this issue of the situation going out of control in their particular states and them not being able to implement this act?
See, here's the irony of this entire situation. When NRC was undertaken in Assam, for the most part it was peaceful because they understood the value of the exercise. After that, what has followed is not a nationwide NRC, but a Citizenship Amendment Act which is meant to include people and not to exclude. Assume for a moment somebody has a problem with the Citizenship Amendment Act on the ground that certain people have not been included. Why should that stop the process of inclusion of the others who are beneficiaries of this particular act? I don't understand. Assume for a moment that there is indeed a legitimate, genuine, valid concern that by design some people are kept out of this particular structure. Why should that be used against the inclusion and implementation of the act as it stands today for people who have already suffered enough? That's a question that nobody has asked so far. If you want more inclusion, why should that stop existing inclusion? That's point number two. Point number three, coming to this issue of law and order. How you address a law and order situation is exclusively within the domain of the state. But can that be used to prevent the implementation of a certain subject that falls within the scope of the union list and which comes as a fiat from the union? Frankly, that is not possible. Let's understand one or two things here. Since India as it stands today is the amalgamation of British India plus princely states, and if you look at the design of the instruments of accession, that is the reason why you have a significant amount of division of power between the center and the states, so that some amount of say continues with those states which were erstwhile princely states as well. That's one of the reasons if you look at the instruments of accession. Now the 370 is going on, people will see that even more. Two, the purpose of integration at the end of the day was to ensure that India does not go the Balkan route, which is to say that we do not undergo balkanization under any circumstances, because no independent state of this country, any princely state is capable of withstanding any let's say international power which has any aggressive designs or expansive designs. That is why the Union of India is important, because it gives you one single unit that responds to the rest of the world. That is the fundamental concept that you protect through the idea of India, and which is why it is a union of states. It is not a federation of states, and that is why a significant portion of these powers are centralized in nature. They are within the domain of the parliament, the exclusive, the sole preserve of the parliament. That's point number two. Point number three, I have to ask myself this question. If the parliament does not have the right to comment on citizenship and expect implementation of the law with respect to citizenship, what power do you leave with the parliament? This is the most fundamental thing, the identity of the country. After all, India is not a dharamshala for all practical purposes. It is a sovereign it's a sovereign state. It has its own defined borders. You have to respect that. And when citizenship has a bearing on internal security as well as external aggression, particularly with dramatis personae from outside the country having a vested interest as far as India's composition is concerned, it is all the more imperative that states don't politicize this particular issue, because you will be sacrificing the nation's security, its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, its demographic composition, its demographic integrity at the altar of narrow, petty political interests. I don't think this is the issue that they must actually play politics around. This is absolutely not done. Using law and order can buy you time to defer the implementation, but even that cannot be indefinite, and that cannot be indeterminate. It has to be specific, and you have to cite what these problems are. Assume for a moment that those people who are actually creating law and order problems are the ones who are illegal immigrants and who are meant to be weeded out and deported from this country. Can you cite them and their sentiments and their grouses and grievances as the reason for non-implementation of the CAA? I don't think that can hold water at all, because there will always be any number of people, especially people who are going to be affected by a future NRC, which is what these people are actually acting up against. That cannot come in the way of the implementation of the CAA. CAA is not about deportation. It is about recognizing people who are languishing in refugee camps and detention and refugee camps across the country. Delhi, in Kochi, in several places, you have all these refugees who have come from these three countries who are persecuted minorities. In fact, last summer in Delhi, those people lived without, Pakistani Hindu refugees lived without electricity for 3 months, in fact more than 3 months. Imagine living in Delhi summer without any electricity, without having sanitary conditions. Those are the people which this particular act benefits. We have to consider that. I would actually suggest that the National Human Rights Commission should step into the picture. if as a consequence of the non-implementation of the CAA by states, the human rights and the basic dignities that these refugees are supposed to get in this country as a consequence of CAA is thwarted, is stalled, then the NHRC, which gets into the issue of human rights almost in every case, must get into that issue. Unfortunately, we haven't heard the NHRC so far on this particular issue.
Okay, all right. Dr. Harmantaya, since we are here, then what's the best way forward?
No, even now the government of India, central government has to take some steps to convince the governments, state governments. You should call the National Advisory Council and discuss with all the chief ministers, hear them what are their problems, hear them what is the difficulty in implementing that. If there is any problem, the government of India can bring another amendment. What is that? See, the nation is important, not the law. See, law is very important because the nation stands first. So, the government of India should take initiative in calling all the chief ministers and ask their grievances, then go ahead in implementing this.
Okay, all right. Satya Prakash, let me get a closing comment from you before I wind up the program on the best way forward.
Well, a nation cannot be run like an NGO. I can understand the sympathy for those who are refugees other than these 6 communities. But a country has to run like a country, has to be run like a country. And here, the classification that has been made is based on religious persecution. Let the law be implemented, because as Sai has pointed out, those who are beneficiary of this law, let them get the benefit because they have suffered a lot. So far as others are concerned, it is not that it's not being offered to them. The only part is that the relaxation has not been offered to them. They are eligible to apply if they qualify for that, and then the state will consider that. No way it affects the existing Indian citizens. And those who are on the streets must understand this, and they must stop this protest, because it is not about Indians. It is about foreigners who are already here, and we need to distinguish between those who are in dire need of that citizenship and those who have come here for maybe economic reasons. And that is why this protest must end, and people need to understand it. I am of the view that the government must publicize the correct things about this bill in the public, maybe through media, television media, and maybe through print media, because there is there are lots of misgivings about this law. And if you talk to a common man on the street, generally people think that Muslims are not getting citizenship, or maybe they will be excluded from citizenship. That is the kind of rumor going around that must be countered from the authentic, from those in government and those who are responsible, like you and me. We are trying to counter it. It has to be countered. Otherwise, the kind of protests that are going in Delhi and some other parts of the country, it's very violent, and people are trying to take law into their own hands. And Supreme Court has refused to take cognizance of their petitions. They said you go to high courts and the high courts will entertain it. This is how we can tackle this kind of problem. Otherwise, it's very difficult. I have seen those protests a couple of days back in Delhi.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the CAA has nothing to do with Indian citizens. It's, of course, about citizenship and naturalization of those particular communities from those 3 major countries, is what the panelists are suggesting. And also, we have to remember that the CAA, or citizenship and naturalization, it's a subject that comes under the union list, and the states really cannot refuse to implement the act passed by Parliament. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.